the Venetian Conspiracy. Elena Moretti wasn't an adventurer or a detective. She was an art historian, content to spend her days in the hushed galleries of Venice, studying brushstrokes and palettes. Her world revolved around paintings, their colors, and the stories behind their creation. But she never imagined that one of those stories would draw her into a web of crime, deception, and danger. It all began on a foggy autumn morning in Venice. The canals were shrouded in mist, and the sound of gondoliers calling out to one another echoed through the labyrinth of waterways. Elena sipped her espresso at a small cafe near the Grand Canal, her worn leather satchel resting at her feet. Inside it were documents about her latest project, the mysterious disappearance of the Weeping Lady, a Baroque masterpiece by an obscure Venetian artist. The painting had vanished from a private collection decades ago, but whispers of its reappearance had recently surfaced. An anonymous tip had led the gallery Elena worked for to commission her to investigate its authenticity. If true, the painting's recovery could become a significant cultural event. As she reviewed her notes, her phone buzzed. It was a text from her friend and colleague, Luca Romano, a curator at the Accademia Gallery. "Come to the gallery. Urgent. Found something you need to see." Intrigued, Elena finished her espresso and made her way through the winding streets to the gallery. Luca was waiting for her in the archives, a broad grin on his face. "You're going to love this," he said, motioning for her to follow him. He led her to a table where a faded black and white photograph lay beneath a magnifying glass. "What is it?" Elena asked. "This photo was taken in 1985, Luca explained. "It's from the private collection of a deceased art dealer, Vincenzo Salieri. Look closer." Elena bent over the photograph. It depicted a dimly lit room filled with paintings, their ornate frames stacked haphazardly against the walls. Her heart skipped a beat when her eyes landed on one in particular. A canvas showing a sorrowful woman, her face framed by dark curls and a single tear glistening on her cheek. It was unmistakable, the Weeping Lady. Elena's excitement was short-lived. Salieri's reputation had been dubious at best, with rumors linking him to stolen artworks. "If this painting was in his collection, it raises questions," Elena said. "How did he acquire it?" Luca nodded grimly. "That's the problem. Salieri was suspected of laundering money through art sales. His death left many loose ends, and most of his collection vanished into private hands." Elena's mind raced. If the Weeping Lady was part of a laundering operation, it might still be out there, but tracking it down would be like chasing a ghost through the maze of Venice. As she gathered her thoughts, Luca handed her another piece of paper, a receipt dated 3 months earlier, issued by an auction house in Zurich. The listed item was cryptically described as Baroque canvas, Venetian origin. The buyer was anonymous, but the seller was linked to a known art smuggler. "Sick, this could be our lead," Luca said, "but it's risky. These people don't operate within the law." Elena hesitated. She wasn't trained for this kind of work, but the chance to recover such an important piece of Venetian art history was too compelling to ignore. "I need to find out more," she said. "Do you know anyone who can help?" Luca's expression darkened. "There's one person, Alessandro Marchetti. He's an art restorer with connections. And in the tray, if anyone knows the underbelly of the art world, it's him." Elena arranged to meet Alessandro at his workshop the next day. His reputation preceded him. Known as a brilliant but elusive figure in the art community, Alessandro had a penchant for walking the fine line between legal and illegal dealings. The workshop was tucked away in a quiet alley, its facade unassuming. Inside, the air smelled of paint and varnish. Canvases in various states of restoration lined the walls, and a long wooden table was covered with brushes, solvents, and tools. Alessandro greeted her with a sly smile. He was tall and lean, his hands stained with paint, and his eyes sharp with curiosity. "So you're the historian chasing shadows," he said, motioning for her to sit. Elena explained her search for the Weeping Lady and showed him the photograph and receipt. Alessandro studied them in silence, his fingers drumming lightly on the table. "This is dangerous territory," he said finally. "You're stepping into a world where art isn't just beauty, it's currency, power, and leverage." "Do you know where the painting might be?" Elena asked. "I don't," Alessandro admitted. But I've heard whispers about a group operating across Europe, laundering money through stolen art. They're connected to auction houses, private collectors, and even forgeries. If this painting is in their hands, they'll guard it fiercely. Elena's heart sank, but Alessandro wasn't finished. There's an art fair in Milan next week, he said. It's more than it seems. Buyers and sellers from the shadows use it as a front for their trades. If the weeping lady has resurfaced, someone there might know. Elena left the workshop with a mix of hope and trepidation. The stakes were higher than she'd anticipated, but she couldn't turn back now. That evening, as she sat by her window overlooking the canal, she felt the weight of her decision. Venice glimmered under the moonlight, its beauty timeless, yet fragile. Elena knew that art wasn't just about the past. It was a living connection to culture, identity, and memory. If she could recover the weeping lady, it wouldn't just be a triumph for her, it would be a victory for Venice itself. But she also knew that danger lurked in the shadows of the art world. As she prepared for her journey to Milan, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. The art fair in Milan buzzed with energy. Beneath the grand arches of the Palazzo Arti, collectors, curators, and dealers moved with a practiced ease, their conversations a careful dance of coded words and concealed intentions. Elena Moretti felt out of place among them, her simple attire and hesitant manner marking her as an outsider in this world of polished veneers and hidden agendas. She clutched her leather satchel tightly, the photograph of the weeping lady tucked inside. Alessandro's cryptic instructions replayed in her mind. Watch, listen, but trust no one. The Palazzo's central gallery was a maze of exhibits, with paintings and sculptures displayed like trophies. Elena wandered through the crowd, her eyes scanning for anything resembling the weeping lady. Each booth boasted pieces from renowned and obscure artists alike, but none of them matched the masterpiece she sought. Her unease grew as she noticed the attendees. Beneath their polished exteriors, there was something unsettling about them, their smiles too sharp, their eyes too calculating. This wasn't just an art fair, it was a marketplace for secrets. At one booth, a small oil painting caught her attention. It was a landscape, unremarkable at first glance, but the style of the brushstrokes tugged at her memory. She leaned closer, studying the signature in the corner. The initials matched those of the artist who had painted the weeping lady. Her heart raced. "Interested in Baroque works, are you?" a voice said behind her. Elena turned to find a tall man in an impeccably tailored suit, his smile friendly but his eyes piercing. "You seem drawn to this piece," he added, gesturing to the painting. "It's beautiful," Elena replied cautiously. The man tilted his head. "It's a modest work, but its provenance is fascinating. Pieces like this often lead to greater treasures, don't you think?" Elena felt a chill at his words. Was he testing her? She forced a smile. "I'm always interested in learning more." The man nodded, then slipped her a card. "Perhaps we can discuss your interests further. Enjoy the fair, Signorina." As he walked away, Elena studied the card. It bore only a name, Matteo Ricci, and a phone number. Alessandro had warned her about people like this. Polished predators who sniffed out curiosity like sharks scenting blood. Determined to stay cautious, Elena continued her search. In one of the quieter wings, she found herself drawn to a smaller exhibit, where a series of paintings were displayed with minimal fanfare. Among them, a familiar face caught her eye, a sorrowful woman with dark curls and a single tear glistening on her cheek. The weeping lady. Her breath caught as she stepped closer. The lighting was dim, but there was no mistaking it. The delicate brushstrokes, the haunting expression. It was the painting she'd been chasing. Before she could study it further, a man approached her. He was older, with graying hair and an air of authority. "Beautiful, isn't it?" he said, his tone measured. "Yes," Elena replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "It's remarkable. Do you know its history?" The man's lips curled into a faint smile. "History is complicated, especially with pieces like this. What matters is who owns it now." "And who is that?" Elena asked, trying to sound casual. The man's smile didn't falter, but his eyes hardened. Someone who values discretion. Elena knew she couldn't press further without arousing suspicion. She nodded politely and moved away, her mind spinning. The weeping lady was here, but retrieving it would be far more dangerous than she'd anticipated. Later that evening, Elena retreated to her hotel room, the city's lights flickering through the window. She called Alessandro, her voice hushed. "I found it," she said. "The painting is here." "Did you confirm it's the original?" Alessandro asked. "I'm certain, but it's being closely watched. There's a man, older, authoritative. He hinted that the painting is part of something bigger." Alessandro was silent for a moment. "Be careful, Elena. If the painting is connected to a laundering operation, they won't let it go easily." "I know," she replied, "but I can't walk away now." Alessandro sighed. "Then you'll need leverage. If they're laundering money through art, there will be records, receipts, invoices, shipping manifests. Find those and you might have a chance to expose them." The next day, Elena returned to the fair, this time with a plan. She kept her distance from the weeping lady, knowing it was too risky to approach it again. Instead, she observed the staff managing the exhibit. One man, a young assistant with an air of nervous energy, caught her attention. He seemed out of place, fidgeting and glancing around as if afraid of being caught. Elena waited until he stepped away from the exhibit and followed him into a back corridor. "Excuse me," she said, catching up to him. "I couldn't help but notice you were working near The Weeping Lady. It's such a fascinating piece." The man stiffened. "I don't know much about it," he said quickly, avoiding her gaze. "I'm an art historian," Elena pressed. "I'd love to learn more about its journey to this exhibit." The man hesitated, his nervousness palpable. "I really shouldn't talk about it." Elena softened her tone. "If you know anything, it could help ensure the painting's legacy. These works deserve to be protected." The man glanced around, then leaned closer. "There's a storage room on the east side of the palazzo," he whispered. "That's where they keep the shipping records. But you didn't hear that from me." Before Elena could thank him, he hurried away. That night, Elena made her move. Dressed in dark clothes, she slipped into the palazzo's east wing, her heart pounding. The storage room was locked, but a janitor's cart nearby provided a set of keys. She entered the room, her hands trembling. Inside, rows of filing cabinets lined the walls. She sifted through them, her fingers brushing against invoices and manifests. Finally, she found what she was looking for, a folder labeled with a series of numbers. Inside were documents tying The Weeping Lady to an auction house in Zurich and a series of offshore accounts. Elena photographed everything, her mind racing. This was the proof Alessandro had talked about, evidence of a laundering operation spanning multiple countries. But as she turned to leave, a shadow fell across the doorway. "Well," a familiar voice said, cold and amused, "I didn't take you for a thief, Signorina Moretti." It was Matteo Ricci. Elena froze. Matteo Ricci's imposing figure blocked the doorway, his sharp eyes glinting in the dim light of the storage room. The folder in her hands felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Her heart raced as she considered her options, none of them good. "Well, Signorina," Matteo continued, stepping closer, "you've been quite the curious guest. I warned you to enjoy the fair, not dig into matters that don't concern you." Elena forced herself to stay calm. "I'm an art historian. Uncovering the truth about pieces like The Weeping Lady is my job." Matteo chuckled, a low, dangerous sound. "Truth? Let me tell you something about truth. It's a luxury only those in power can afford." Before Elena could respond, Matteo gestured and two burly men entered the room. "Take the folder," he ordered, "and make sure she doesn't leave." The men advanced, but Elena's grip on the folder tightened. As they lunged, she ducked beneath their grasp, darting around the room. Her satchel swung wildly as she grabbed a metal shelf and pulled with all her strength. The shelf toppled, sending papers and boxes crashing to the floor, creating a brief barrier between her and her pursuers. "Get her!" Matteo roared. Elena sprinted for the door, clutching the folder to her chest. Her legs burned as she raced down the corridor, her mind spinning. She had to get to Alessandro. He was the only one who could help. The palazzo's maze-like halls worked to her advantage. She slipped through a side exit into the cool Milanese night, her breath visible in the air. The streets were quiet, but she didn't stop running until she reached a crowded piazza, blending into the throngs of tourists and late-night revelers. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was Alessandro. "Elena, where are you? Are you safe? I've got the documents," she said breathlessly. "But Matteo Ricci knows. I'm being followed." "Meet me at the central train station," Alessandro said. "We'll get you out of Milan." The train station was bustling, its grand arches echoing with the sounds of announcements and footsteps. Elena spotted Alessandro near the ticket counter, his usual calm demeanor tinged with worry. "Here," she said, handing him the folder. "These documents tie the Weeping Lady to a laundering operation. Ricci is involved." Alessandro flipped through the papers, his expression grim. "This is bigger than I thought. We need to get these to the authorities." Before they could move, a familiar voice cut through the noise. "Not so fast." Elena turned to see Matteo and his men approaching, their eyes locked on her. Panic surged through her, but Alessandro grabbed her arm. "Come on!" They darted through the station, weaving between travelers and luggage. Matteo's men gave chase, their heavy footsteps closing in. Alessandro led Elena to a service stairwell, where they burst through a door and onto a platform. A train was idling, its doors about to close. "Get on!" Alessandro shouted, shoving her toward the train. "What about you?" Elena asked. "I'll hold them off. Go." Elena hesitated, but Alessandro's determined expression left no room for argument. She jumped onto the train just as the doors slid shut. Through the window, she saw Alessandro confronting Matteo, his stance defiant. The train began to move and Alessandro disappeared from view. The train carried Elena out of Milan and into the quiet countryside. She found an empty seat and opened the folder, reviewing the evidence. The receipts and shipping records painted a damning picture. Matteo Ricci was at the center of a vast network smuggling stolen art and laundering money through offshore accounts. The Weeping Lady was just one piece of a larger scheme. As dawn broke, the train pulled into Venice. Exhausted but resolute, Elena made her way to the Carabinieri headquarters. She presented the folder to an officer, explaining everything she had uncovered. The officer listened intently, his expression growing graver with each passing detail. "This is significant," he said. "We've been tracking suspicious activity in the art world for years, but this could be the breakthrough we need." Elena's relief was short-lived. "What about Matteo Ricci?" she asked. "He won't stop." The officer nodded. "We'll issue a warrant for his arrest. But be careful. People like him have a way of slipping through the cracks." Days turned into weeks, and the fallout from the investigation spread across Europe. Authorities raided Ricci's properties, uncovering dozens of stolen masterpieces and millions in laundered funds. Ricci himself vanished, but his network crumbled under the weight of the evidence Elena had provided. Despite the danger she had faced, Elena felt a sense of fulfillment. She had done more than recover the Weeping Lady. She had helped expose a web of corruption that had tainted the art world for years. One evening, as Elena walked along a quiet Venetian canal, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Alessandro. "Safe. Well done, Elena. You've made Venice proud." She smiled, her heart lifting. The next day, she stood in the gallery where the Weeping Lady had been installed, now fully restored and displayed for the public. Visitors marveled at its beauty, unaware of the danger and sacrifice it had taken to bring it home. As Elena gazed at the painting, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. The art world was full of shadows, but she knew she had the courage to face them. For her, every brushstroke told a story, and some stories were worth risking everything to protect.